Music Not Diving is brought to you by Acid. Head over to ac55id.com to check out the fastest growing electronic music marketplace. What is Acid? Well, it's basically like Bandcamp, but they do certain things a little bit differently and just provides a bit of an alternative, a bit of plurality in that area of the music industry, which absolutely needs it. So if you're a label, if you're an artist, if you're just a music fan, this is something you absolutely need to know about. So you can buy music, sell music, stream music. It's 1 cent per stream, the paybacks over there. That's also including podcasts. So if you're watching us over on ac55id.com, then we're getting paid. They've got a pressing plant and they can fulfill pressing orders on demand. So if you're doing vinyl as a label, this is an absolutely great solution for you. The other great thing, and perhaps the greatest thing about them, is they're supporting this podcast. So head over to ac55id.com to check them out.
This is Music Not Diving with Scuba.
Welcome to the show. I'm Scuba. This is Music Not Diving. Okay, I am slightly bleary-eyed as I'm recording this. You may be able to tell. I didn't even go to Glastonbury this weekend either. So something happened and it has left me slightly the worse for wear, but that's okay because we got so much great feedback to last week's episode with James Holden. That was, according to quite a lot of you, one of our best ever episodes, maybe even the best ever episode that we've done. And, you know, our previous episodes are pretty good, so that's quite a high bar to judge it by. We are going to celebrate last week's success by remastering and rebroadcasting possibly my favorite ever episode of this podcast. Actually, it was the last incarnation, the Not a Diving podcast, number 110 of that show. It is with Steve Davis, 6-time world snooker champion Steve Davis. What is he doing on a music podcast? You may be asking yourself. Well, he's also an electronic musician. He plays modular synth in a band called the Utopia Strong. They are absolutely awesome. And actually, it sort of makes sense to have this following James Holden because their music isn't that far departed from James's recent stuff. It's really, really good. I'm going to leave some links in the show notes to their more recent releases, the ones they've done since we first broadcast this episode with Steve. There's some really good stuff in there. There's a BBC session they did at Maida Vale, which is absolutely awesome, in fact. And they're just, doing some interesting stuff, basically. But Steve is an interesting character, obviously, apart from that, because he has been extraordinarily famous, is still extraordinarily famous. And one of the things I like doing on this show is interrogating the psychology of musicians, and becoming famous is an extremely psychologically challenging thing. Steve, during his heyday in the mid-80s, was one of the most famous people in Britain, like straightforwardly. The 1985 World Snooker Final was watched by 18 million people after midnight on BBC Two. That's still a record, by the way. And the kind of culture of snooker that grew up in the 1980s following the televisation of the sport was just quite remarkable. It was the most popular televised sport, in fact, in the UK during the 1980s. And Steve was the Tiger Woods of snooker, basically, certainly in that era. He was obviously followed by Stephen Hendry and more recently by Ronnie O'Sullivan. But Steve was the best player ever, like unambiguously, in the mid-80s. So this is an unbelievable person to talk to. I was really, really quite nervous before having the conversation. Didn't know him at all. It is one of my favorites, I have to say, possibly my favorite of the 170 episodes or so that we've done of this show. And yeah, it's absolutely awesome. So even if you listen to it first time round, this is a remastered version. The audio is way, way better. So let's just get into it, shall we? But just before we do that, a reminder that you can support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/ScubaOfficial. I'm doing bonus podcasts every 2 weeks now. There will be one going up this week where I talk about different issues in the music industry. On the higher tier of our Patreon, you get all the music that we release on Hot Flush Recordings and affiliated labels too. So that is a pretty great offering. If you don't want to do that, completely understand. Please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Leave a comment, in fact. Tell us, what you think we should do with the channel. That'd be great. Whether you like the video or not, all that kind of good stuff. It all helps. It genuinely does. So without further delay, let's check out the remastered version of my conversation with 6-time world snooker champion and modular musician, Steve Davis.
Brought to you by AC55ID.
Steve Davis, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Great, Paul. Thank you very much. Do I call you Paul or do you?
Yeah. Please do. Yeah.
I could call you Scuba 4.
I mean, yeah. That's my Discogs name, isn't it?
That is your Discogs name, as opposed to my name, which is Steve Davis 50.
Is it right? Okay.
So you're well ahead of the game here, as I know, because I have your records, or some of them at least.
Do you? Wow. Okay.
I have claustrophobia somewhere in my record racks, but
right.
Since I've got more as well of some 12 inches, but when I moved, my filing system went up the creek, so there's no way I could prove at this point that I've got your albums, because I don't know where they are, but they are here.
Okay. Well, thanks for supporting, I guess, you know.
Well, I'm going to say.
I mean, I actually wanted to start with DJing because, I mean, that's a nice, well, this is the closest parallel that I can draw between the two of us. Did you support Blur at Wembley Stadium? Did I read that correctly?
Yeah. It was mad. We still don't really know why they asked us, although I think one of their people who is involved in their studio work knew Carvers Tarabi and sort of put in a good word for us as potentially sort of different DJs. But when the phone rang, it was just ridiculous. It was like, what, why? What are they snooker fans? We still don't really know. But it was a really good challenge to DJ in between the artists from sort of 5 o'clock in the afternoon onwards,
right? Which
was an unusual thing to do. But it was great fun. But what was funnier was that on the first night, Carvers Tarabi couldn't make it, so I thought, I can't do it on my own. I'll be bricking it. So I thought, who can I speak to? So I phoned up John Doran, who writes the Quietus, so, you know, and has great musical knowledge, and he's a great DJ. So I phoned him up. I said, John, what are you doing on the 8th of July? And he went, I'm not sure. So I said, do you fancy DJ with me? He went, well, maybe. So he said, where is it? I went, Wembley. And he went, what? The Wembley area? I went, no, Wembley. And then he just went, what, Blur? I went, yeah. He went, I'm there. I've got to do it. So he rearranged his life, and I had the pleasure of DJing with two wonderful DJs and musicians and knowledgeable musical people, and both nights were different.
Yeah, I mean, what did you play?
Oh, God, we played a cross-section of stuff. Well, I mainly left the first night to John so that he could get a bit of the buzz of doing it, because I was going to be DJing the next night with Carvers. So John played a cross-section of things from like Nurse with Wound to Stereo Lab. We really sort of pushed the boundaries of, you know, so we weren't playing incidental music, but to be fair, most people were just coming in cold sober and just waiting for Blur.
Sure.
Yeah, and so it was hard to remember, but we bombarded them with all the stuff we'd normally do, which wouldn't be what they were expecting. And every now and again, yeah, we put like a relatively well-known track, or like, you know, Talk, you know, a track or something like that, and it got a few little pockets of people going, "Yay!" It was great, but we didn't go too much down any one road, so we didn't get too techno-y. But there again, we don't get too techno, and we don't know how to mix. I can't mix anything.
I mean, DJing it's a job, isn't it? You're there in any set. You're there to do a specific thing, right? And I suppose warming up for Blur is just it's a different set of requirements, I suppose, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was the concern was, you know, what was the point that I thought was, what's the point of getting some DJs in who don't just go through the motions? And I'm not saying it in an idea, but would be playing, say, the same BPM music or something just to sort of keep people in a holding pattern, waiting. What will be the point of playing an unusual African track?
Sure.
Yeah, thinking, it's you know, people aren't really there we're just sort of like waiting. We're just sort of like,
yeah, people are having a beer and getting ready, aren't they? So you need to soundtrack that, I guess.
Well, it's also the fact that they weren't really having that much of a beer, because once they're stuck in the crowd, they got like a mile to walk to go and get a beer at probably really expensive prices. I doubt they were allowed to smuggle beer in. So they were pretty sort of like a sober crowd, waiting for the main band to sort of roll up about 10 o'clock. So I don't think anybody got particularly out of it as the day went on. So that was fascinating in its own way, that you were then playing to a sober crowd, which is hard, maybe even harder to get going.
Yeah.
But if you DJ at a small little club, they're the best ones. They're the great ones. Sure. But it was the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so was it basically full then, I imagine? So 80,000 people or something?
Well, no, because to start off with, at 5 o'clock when they opened the doors, it was a totally empty building. So we sort of, we were playing sort of music as they were coming in. And then when the first band went on, when we ducked down behind the little DJ booth, we got off stage, waited, and then went back on for, say, another 17 minutes until the next band went on, and then another sort of little dribs and drabs. But it was really enjoyable. And the people down the front, we could see, that every now and again somebody would sort of, I know this track. And but as a job, I think it was quite a tough one. But we probably couldn't have messed it up because it wouldn't have mattered what we played. But it was still good fun to play some, to put a bit of Magma on at Wembley. And Magma got played at Wembley.
Magma, yeah. I had never heard Magma until this morning when I started digging deep into your previous utterances about music. Magma are a pretty incredible band, aren't they? I've deduced.
Yeah, they're mad. Yeah, I stumbled into them in my teens, and I'm so pleased that they did come to the UK back in the 70s. When they were part of A&M Records, so they were getting a bit more promotion, a bit more publicity in the major news, in the music press. And they came to London, and I happened to go along and just was blown away by this crazy band of people that seemed to be playing music I'd never experienced. So, Magma comes from the era that was the prog era, but for me, they're not prog. They're their own entity.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, stick a pin in that because I had that down as a question already. But when did you play your first DJ set?
Okay. So our first official DJ set was Block Weekend.
Oh, right.
The last ever Block Weekend.
I remember hearing about it, actually. I remember hearing that you were going to play a set, and like everyone else was like, okay, Steve Shaver's on the decks.
What? Yeah. So what happened was, we don't really know exactly how it panned out, but we were DJing in a tap room in Bethnal Green in the brewery upstairs in the brewery was called Red Church Brewery, and we were just DJing there on every once a month on a Friday night or something like that, and then. Yeah, most people just in there for beer and not really interested. But
well, hang on a second though. I mean, how does that happen in the first place?
Well, a friend, somebody who was a friend of the brewer said, "Well, because the brewer wanted some music, some music on, and he was a half a DJ himself, I think." So Tim, because I was doing a radio show at the time,
sure,
with Carvers Tarabi, so we'd never even considered doing any DJing other than just doing the radio show. And then all of a sudden we got this invite. So we had previous of thinking we may be able to sort of entertain people in a sitting down environment, but the brief wasn't to make anybody dance. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, and we don't know whether they come along to the Bethnal Green Brewery or they just knew of the fact that we'd been DJing there. The two lads from Block Weekend just invited us, and at that time we didn't have an agent or anything, so. We went, okay, so we didn't have a clue what to do. And the next minute, we sort of said, we don't really play techno. We can't play, electronic music. We don't know, are we the right person? And they went, no, we want you in the bar, in the pub venue.
Sure.
As a sort of foil to some of the more electronic stuff that's going out there. So then all of a sudden we went, now we got to think about trying to make people dance. And that was the next job of the journey. It wasn't just listening music. So then Block Weekend, we went to, and BBC iPlayer thought it was enough of a novel idea that they sent a film crew down to film it as like a fly on the wall documentary. And then it was on iPlayer during the World Snooker Championship as a sort of novelty thing to drop in. Then the next minute the phone started ringing, and our second ever booking was Glastonbury.
Wow.
2016. So so now we're sort of like pro level DJs, and played in the Stonebridge bar at Park in the Park area to about 500 people. Nervous as kittens, wondering what has that happened to my life. But fortunately for me, even though I'm pretty not demonstrative behind the deck, I just stand there Carlos Tarabi's a front man for Gong, and he loves, he loves to sort of lark about. So he's the sort of visual person in our band who has been likened to our Bez, which is quite
right.
But he's more than he's not more than.
He's playing stuff as well, right? Yeah.
Well, he's choosing some of the music, but he just likes to have a dance, and I wish I could as well, but I don't. I just stand there waiting as if I'm lining up the next shot.
Right, but he takes the pressure off you a bit.
Totally. So, and I just like watching him do it. He larks about and swings 4 gangs around as if it's a microphone. It's just he'll hold a chair up in the air for half an hour just for no good reason. It's quite a sort of going into mad mode is a good idea, I think. But of course, if you're doing a technical DJ set, that requires concentration. But we are more selectors, so we just choose the next track, and there's no real need for it to merge into the next one.
Sure.
We just press stop and press play, and hopefully the selections tell their own story.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is a school of thought that says that is by far the most important aspect of DJing. So I guess if that's true, then you're doing okay, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose so. But I mean, the skill of choosing what goes after another, I suppose, it is born out of a bit of experience of messing up a lot of times. So
right.
you do get your mistakes when you choose the wrong record. But I think if we could mix, we probably would do a bit more of it. But,
okay.
But and I find it always so clever when people do that. But it's sort of this dark art that I'm never going to find. And actually, years back. And you have to go back into sadly the gentleman's password. He doesn't do it. But years back, there was a guy called Les Adams who was an early DJ mixer. He had a track in the charts, and I used to play his father at chess. And for a little bit, I went round Les's house with 2 Technics turntables and tried to learn how to mix, but it was never going to work.
Really?
I done it. I sort of like I BPM'd up a load of disco records. What they were. When the intros were and how many beats, any bars it was, and a lot of my 12-inch records have got those stickers on them still. But
okay.
But I never got. I don't know. I never got around to it. I don't think that was what my skill base wanted. I didn't want that. I just wanted to listen to the music. So it didn't become a passion.
Fine. Yeah.
Doing the mixing.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. I mean, it is, actually, to be fair, with the CD these days, it is very easy.
Yes. Yeah. But, back with the records, when he was sort of like holding the spindle and slowing the record down a fraction, or spinning it around to get it going faster. Yeah, I'd have never thought of that in a million years. So is that how you started off, or did you straight in?
Well, when I went to university, the first thing I did when I got my student loan and this is in 1998, I guess, was buy a pair of Technics 1210s, and I've still got them. So that was, I already knew how to, I knew how to mix before that, having practiced on, a mate's pair.
Right.
But that was mostly what I did at university, actually. It's just buy records and play them in my room and not really go to any lecture and like that. So yeah, absolutely.
That's what uni's about. I live in Bristol now. I live in Bristol now, and I feel.
Well, actually, I went to Bristol Uni. So that was there. Yeah.
Well, then there's too much fun happening in Bristol to be going studying, isn't there? You just gotta. Yeah, totally.
Absolutely. So okay, so you mentioned Carlos Tarabi, your erstwhile partner in music. So you're in the Utopia Strong together.
Yes, it's got even sillier. My life. I don't think my first life was ever normal. How on earth can getting a ball in a hole with a stick be a career? But
right,
that
you're
happened.
Twiddling knobs on a stage.
Yeah.
So tell me, okay. So I've read a fair bit about the backstory to this, but I'd love to get your kind of, get it from the horse's mouth, as it were. So you two met for the first time in 2006, is that right? At a Magma gig? Did I read that correctly?
The timings are probably around that time. Yeah, that would be about right. I think when Magma were doing their retrospective at a small venue in Paris, and we bumped into each other a couple of times over that 4-week period, and then became mates. And then I found that he was in a band and I was doing a radio show on my own. So I said, "Oh, come on the show, because we can do the whole thing. You can choose all the music." And I think for a 2-hour show, Carver's brought along 80 CDs for a 2-hour, because he couldn't decide what he was going to play for that 2-hour period. And we had a right laugh. And then I said, I'd come and do it again if you want. And then we did it again and had even more fun. And then it became regular. We did it every week. So we had a great night show on a Monday evening on Phoenix FM, a local radio station. And that was how we first bumped into each other. And then it spiraled out of control with the DJing. But the band thing is totally different, because there was no plan for us to have a band until in 2015. I stumbled upon Mike Bourne, who plays in Teeth of the Sea, but also plays a modular synth in a smaller band called Hervé Kalari. And I went along to Cafe Otto and saw this guy playing a modular synth for the first time. Right. And I went, well, that looks fun. There's no keyboard. I don't need any. I don't need it. I could do that. It doesn't need any skill. Look, where's the dexterity here? I've used up all my dexterity in another form. Wow, I could just plug a wire in. So I rolled up to him and said, "What the hell is it?" And he pointed me in the right direction. And then I bought a modular synth. And for about a year and a half, it just sat there doing nothing because I was overawed by it. I didn't even know I didn't even think to open the manual and the instruction book. And slowly I learned how to get some sound out of it. And once I'd reached that...
Sorry, can I just ask you, I interrupted you there. What was it? What did you buy exactly?
A modular synthesizer. Well, it's up. You buy the case and you buy all the individual modules. So
yeah.
It wasn't one. Okay, so I at the time a gentleman helped me, and back then I had the sequencer was I'd have to look on Modular Grid. It was a secret, a dual pole secret. It's not that popular now. It was a bit like the Metropolis type sequencer with sliders. That was my main sequence. I had a couple. He got me 2 SQ1s, so that became my whole sequence a bit. I had an all-in-one voice from a Tone Star all-in-one voice, which emulated something Juno-y, I believe. And then a variety of other modules that sort of at the time I didn't really know, what they were. I thought, why do I need a mult? I don't understand what a mult. Why do I need an attenuator? So he gave me all of the constituent parts as a first kit, as a first rig. And I didn't really understand what they were. So I just put a sequence into a VCO and then into a filter and then out through the mixer. And that was me for ages, happy as Larry. And it's a slow learning curve, of which lockdown helped no end. And I started to then devour loads of videos on how to use it. And then once that happened, my sort of playing levels got a little bit more proficient. But along the way, in 2018, once I'd reached some type of standard, Carver Sarabi and our other friend Mike York went, we can have a jam together now, which sort of half struck terror into my heart. I wasn't going to be anywhere near good enough, but we did it anyway so we could have a beer. And we listened back that night and thought, wow, that bit's good. Wow, that bit's nice. We could do something with that. We could just take that bit. And we ended up making an album. We had thought, well, we got this album. What are we going to do with it? So we thought we offered it to a couple of, record labels. And we were at a gig, DJing, and Rocket Recordings had another band on. And we offered it to the Rocket Recordings lads. And they probably obviously gone, there's no way we're touching this with a barge pole. We've got this is one of the people's an ex-snooker player who's only ever outputted music was Snooker Loopy with Chaz and Dave, the Matchroom Mob. And they thought, well, we'll take the CD, but we'll put it straight in the bin. And they must have listened to it and then went, wow, this is actually really interesting. So then we got a record deal. Which we sort of shook hands with Chris Reeder from Rocket at Cafe Otto, where I'd originally seen the first modular synth. And then Chris Reeder's, the worst words that Chris Reeder ever came out of his mouth were, when the record comes out, when the album comes out, you will be touring with it, won't you? And Carvus and Mike York, professional musicians, went, yes, of course. And then then it dawned on me what that actually meant, that I'd have to go on stage and become a musician. So as I so now I am Steve Davis brackets 50. That's me. I can't believe it.
Yeah. What are your musical influences on the group's musical influences primarily?
I suppose everybody's got influences that they're going to bring to their music, but I'm not sure, other than a love of different styles of music. And since I've listened to electronic music, I gravitate towards Biosphere, Gas, Tim Hecker as three people that make music. I think, for me makes sense to me in my brain. So I do like repetitive music. And sort of, I can listen to that for as long as you like. So I'm also able to listen to any type of drone music. So I'd say there's my influences. But Carver's, he's very much, from the past into heavy metal stuff and all things rock. And Mike sort of makes bagpipes as well as plays them. So he sort of has loads of other influences of, artists with a hurdy-gurdy and everything. So it's quite a mishmash. But he also plays modular synth as well. So he's sort of quite into that world. So trying to pin it down, we've been likened a bit to sort of cluster and sort of, that type of sort of music, and we're not particularly dancey, although we have had one techno-y style track that we're quite proud of, but there was no plan with that. We improvise and then stuff comes out.
Yeah. The improvised nature of the performances that I've seen of yours on YouTube. I've never actually been to a show yet, unfortunately. I'm super interested to go to one actually now. But we had so there's been two people on the podcast previously who have described this sort of improvisational electronic performance before. Like Speedy J was one, and also Sebastian Meller, and they talked at length about how this sort of performance works. And from watching you guys. Like I said, watching the clips I have of you guys, and also having seen you interviewed about this before, it sounds like it's a pretty similar thing. So you really start with not a lot, and it's or maybe one element, or one of you brings an element to it, and then it's very organic, quite slow moving, slow developing. Set. Is that?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And I think it's born from the fact that modular synths aren't the best beast to. Well, you can obviously, but you could just wallop samples in left, right, and centre. But if you're trying to replicate night on night with analog style synthesizers, they don't really play the same music every night anyway. There's something. I think there must be different electricity in different parts of the country. I think that's how it happens. So no, that's just a thought. No, it's a conspiracy theory why my modular synth won't play the same thing two nights on the fucking trot, right? So by the nature of the fact that exactly replicating something night after night in modular is very difficult. It's actually more fun that you can't, because we don't play tracks from albums live. We could cheat them, I suppose, and get samples and stems, although the music's not being too stem heavy anyway, because it was all originally recorded in 2-track, and we've kept that sort of that feeling of the DAW is just a tape recorder, and we don't want too much control over it once we've recorded it, because I think it's better not to, because you go mad otherwise. And I now know a lot more about sort of post production. If that's the right word, what's the word? Producing a track in the box, and you then go down to such fine margins of listening to, is everything absolutely perfect, that it feels like the more you mess around with it, the more the sort of the heart of it's being tampered with anyway. So it's quite nice the way we started recording. It's pretty basic, that we can't mess around with it because things are linked to other things. So therefore that is it. That's set in stone. And that's been sort of how it's happened. So then when we play live, we just go, okay, tonight's another night. We'll have a shape. We'll pick a key to start with. and then see where it takes us.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually just nervous thinking about that kind of performance.
Well, yeah, and actually, the funny thing is, because I have me personally have no experience of trying to replicate any music on stage. It feels more like improvised music is very similar to sport,
right?
In as much as you're in the moment and you have to make your decisions based on what's happened and how you're feeling, and you're not having to sort of, there isn't a script that you can check on the snooker table. So actually it probably lends itself better for me than trying to hit sort of like, timings and when the song starts.
Sure.
Yeah. So actually I don't mind it. So for Carvus and Mike, it was a little bit more of a journey into the unknown than they've been used to, but they've embraced it because it gives them the freedom. So what seems to happen is that I might, in the sound check, get a couple of sequences together in sort of, various time signatures that I think, oh, that sounds all right in the sound check, but I'm doing it on headphones. So Mike and Carvus hadn't heard. And then when we start up, even though I might have done a little bit of planning on the day and kept the machine on so that I didn't lose anything, that's their first listening of it on the night as it happens, and then they respond to that. So to some degree, it feels like maybe I'm sort of, for a football analogy, like the back four just doing a solid job of keeping some sort of rhythm, and then Carver, Strabi and Mike York are Lionel Messi and Ronaldo, able to run rings round whatever's thrown at them from the back.
Right. I mean, it's fascinating how you compared it to sport there, actually. So you found pretty, I mean, to snooker, I mean, the football analogy, yeah, maybe not quite so much, but so you found yourself pretty comfortable in that environment?
No, I shit myself.
Okay.
Honestly, well,
I mean, how much of that was just not being quite sure of your own like technique, if I can put it that way?
Yeah, maybe a bit of thinking that I'm just not ready. Yeah. So, but I think it was just the thought of it. So it was so it may have been the fact that that I wasn't really master of my. It may have been to do with that. But even so, I walked out at the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield to play lots of matches, but by the time you get to the final stages of a big event, it's like business as usual. Every day becomes another day.
Sure.
The first round of a snooker competition, first day, is sometimes the most nerve-wracking.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because you're jumping in the deep end a bit. So therefore, you are more nervous in the first round, and that's sometimes where the big names could possibly lose because they haven't settled down and got their teeth into the whole thing.
Yeah. Didn't you lose in the first round?
Yeah.
After having won the first one, your first title in 1981.
Yeah. Collapse like a cheap wardrobe. Yeah, and that can happen. Whereas if you get going and you couple of rounds in, and you then are starting to relax into it. So the biggest thing we've done recently is we toured with Steve Hillage when Steve Hillage band were doing some shows after lockdown just recently, and we did 12 nights on the trot.
Right.
And went on a tour bus. It was great fun. Never done it before. Fantastic fun. How much fun?
Tour bus as well.
But yeah, I know it was messy, but yeah. But after a number of days, I realised that all of a sudden it was more business as usual, and I actually started to enjoy it. But the first couple of one-offs where we were just cold going into it, I remember sitting down at one in front of I think it was standing up at the time, and I thought, I just want to run a million miles from where I am. I froze, totally froze. I don't think I added anything to the gig, and it was probably better for that as well. And it seriously was. It didn't turn out that anywhere near as bad as I felt it was happening. So we recorded loads of our shows, and they're never as bad as you think they are. But the one-off one is when you're really nervous, and then so as nervous, if not more nervous than turning up with a snooker cue in my hand. A bit of imposter syndrome that I probably lost now. I don't feel that so much of a problem now. And our strike rate for having good nights of music is, touch wood, okay. So each one's different, and it is a journey into the unknown, but we sort of seem to be able to sort of turn in a trick or two every now and again. So we're putting out some of the live stuff on our smaller sort of privately released. We've had 4 of those already, and they're like long form pieces, and it's great to have a bit of. Well, you can even hear some of the crowd in the back. It's pretty quite electric, yeah. But I don't know. When I felt very exposed, even though there's 3 of us on stage. So I don't know when you're doing it if you're doing it like that.
I mean,
that's even harder.
Yeah, I think not being completely confident in what you're like physically going to do. I think well, certainly for me, that's when I get nervous. It's usually because of that. So, I've been DJing for such a long time now that I very rarely get nervous in that kind of a way. But sometimes I guess the nearest I come to it is that if I haven't played for a little while and I think maybe I'm supposed to be playing a slightly different kind of set and maybe I haven't prepared quite well enough, then I get nervous.
Yeah.
So it's like not. I find that if I've played a few shows in a row, like you just described, actually, and you pretty much know, not exactly what you're going to do, but you've got a very clear idea of your mind of what the kind of thing you're going to be doing is. And as you made the comparison to snooker, like or any kind of sport like that, I suppose anyone who's done the kind of work that you need to do to get to that level, at some point, instinct, I guess, takes over to a certain extent. Right?
Yeah, and I think, I do think there's differences between different sports in as much as there are the ones that are still ball games like golf and snooker and darts and bowls, anything where you've got to make the thing move, you've got to send the ball off
from a stationary
position. And then you've got the moving ball games, which are pure reaction, even though there's sort of moments when you've got to serve or take a penalty or something like that. But I always felt that sort of the still ball games were, if you were the wrong type of personality, you that may not suit your temperament, that you can't handle your own brain and the time you have to do things and the thinking time when you're not playing the shot, or you've got to make a decision in the moment. That may not appeal to everybody, but it does. Some people can handle it. So the DJ or the musician has some problems and DJs and different musicians as well, just slightly different problems. But it is a case of you sometimes got too much time for your own good to think.
Right.
And it's better if you could take your brain out of gear, keep it in the dressing room, and just let your talent and your lizard brain take over. That is better if you can be in the moment and just forget everything that's around you. But then once you're off and running in a piece of music, you are then on autopilot. But
it's more like one of those sports where the ball is always moving, right?
Yeah. So, but but there are similarities between DJ and being a musician and those. The performance, you've got to instigate it. And you've then got to be the type of person who can think clearly under a bit of pressure, that you're not making bad decisions, and what choices would be, and also operate properly, and your operation is not put off by the nerves. But usually, like, it's more likely, as you say, first night is the one where you're going to be rusty and you're a little bit, you're not confident and you haven't got going enough. But then, if you're doing a tour for day 5, you're in the moment then.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, okay, I wanted to ask you about, this is related to this, but I mean, you've talked about a big problem for sportsmen and women arising when they finish playing, and you actually only finished in 2016, relatively recently. I suppose it's like 8 years ago now, but certainly you were. We talked about. You met Cavus in 2006. There's 10 years of you continuing to be a professional player between then and you quitting. And
Paul, you've been doing homework. I love it. I can't believe it. What a pro! I
mean, I'm something of a snooker fan, so I did know quite a lot of this stuff anyway. But no, I mean, I wanted to ask. Well, a question that popped into my mind as you were just saying that was, I mean, have you found any of your previous habits in terms of preparation rearing their, coming up in your, what you feel like you should do, for example, for a show? Like, is there any, are there any parallels there?
I think I've had experience of being nervous, but I really don't know of a way to stop that. It's obviously, it's probably a good thing that you do get nervous. Otherwise, you're not really, if you can't get nervous and you're not really caring about it, that's a well-known sort of thing. So, I mean, if you're the type of person who seems chilled out, I used to watch Stephen Hendry in the dressing room before matches, sort of, casually get a glimpse of him in his dressing room with the door open or something. And he was just reading a paper before he was about to go out. And I was thinking, I could never have done that. I'd have been got for my fifth piss before, just got, I can't believe he looked so casual and so relaxed. And I was like a gibbering wreck in the dressing room beforehand. And it doesn't really matter because it's not about the dressing room. It's about the moment you walk out to do it. So what I have learned is that it's okay to get nervous. And it's okay to absolutely be losing the plot half an hour before you go on. And hopefully you don't upset anybody and you're not rude to people because you're in your moment of panic. But to just know that as soon as it starts, those nerves will evaporate because you have other things and other fish to fry that you can actually, before you know it, you're in the zone and that's going to happen. So I know that. So that experience has helped me maybe to go, even though I'm going to absolutely crap myself when I walk onto the stage, it won't stay like that. And by the end, there's every chance you'll have had a nice night. So that's comparable to anything, I think. So that's about all I can think of that translates. And I don't know how much of my analytical brain and lizard brain are operating when I'm playing with the Utopia Strong compared to what that balance is playing snooker, but they probably have some similarity.
Yeah. And then, I mean, the question I was actually going to ask was, like, to what extent has this stuff replaced snooker for you? Because it's got to have been, I mean, you were a professional player for 40 years or so, right? Or some crazy amount.
Yeah, it's a stupid amount of time.
Yeah. So
I think what is fortunate in as much as that it's very difficult once you've stopped competing to get that same adrenaline buzz.
Yeah, right. That's kind of what I meant. Yeah.
I think that's the curse of the sports person. There's going to be a time, if they're lucky, where they're going to have everything going their way and they're going to get everything catered for. Adrenaline, success, the excitement of the occasion, the adulation, if that's what they want, the prize money in sport and things like that. And all those things are a big buzz. And the moment you retire or you're no longer, the top of that game, then all of a sudden that becomes a problem for a lot of sports people, I think. And the retiring and then having nothing as direction it can be a dangerous time. And I can only say that I've been incredibly fortunate for my second hobby to have become a profession of some type. I don't think it's exactly the same buzz, but there is the massive similarity between playing live in the band and walking out for a snooker match. The actual making of the records is another thing. That's a different type of subject, a different type of thrill, but it's still some direction that otherwise, what do? Take up gardening. I hate grass, right? I hate, only because you just got to keep the stuff. It's a weed and people love it. And they want to make their weeds look perfect. And that's why I've moved out to Bristol, where there's where I'm sort of, in the sort of heart of the city. And I'm enjoying coming here as opposed to getting on my tractor, on a tractor lawnmower, fortunately at one stage, to mow a load of grass. And then what do you do with the grass? You have to, do you pick it off the grass, put it in like what? So the fact I'm DJing at an age when I should be slowing down and taking Synatogen instead of partying, and I'm a musician on stage instead of mowing my lawn. I'm fighting to be Peter Pan.
Right. I can identify with that. I mean, what was the difference? What was the buzz walking out for a snooker match? What was the nature of the difference, I guess, is what I'm asking. Like, was it the possibility of losing? Is that a bit of an extra jeopardy? Or
Yeah, maybe.
I suppose there is always the possibility of, like, falling on your ass on stage. But yeah, can you define it at all?
I think, I was able to not retire. I started losing and was nowhere near the top of the game, and I still carried on playing because I love the game. I hated the losing, but it wasn't all about winning or losing for me. Otherwise, I probably would have jacked it in a bit like Stephen Hendry did further up the ladder. He retired when he really felt like he was no longer going to win.
Sure.
But I sort of felt like I was no longer going to win, but I still had the drug in me of doing it and enjoying the game. I'm not saying that's any purer than Stephen's. It's just a different sort of view. But there is always, as opposed to, say, if you're playing something on stage, there is always, as you say, this winning and losing. And that's why I think, you practice ready for the event, because it is black and white of you win or you lose. If you lose, you go home. If you win, you live to fight another day, and you get to the final and you win it. Well, what a journey you've been on for that week. So I do think it is motivated by winning. So the moment you start to take a game or a sport to professional level, it changes the equation of what's going on, and slowly you can be addicted to the drug of entering competitions in something you're quite good at, and then that's another world. You're on the conveyor belt of form and of analysing where you went wrong, and that becomes then you start to think, should I have do I have a sports psychologist? Should I be eating different things? It becomes all encompassing. It's all about you. It's very me driven. But and further up the ladder in sports teams like golfers, that they have a team behind them. They got got physio on the road with them, things like this. So that you can see how that becomes even more of the drug of the adrenaline, is the buzz of getting ready for this match where you could possibly win or lose, but you can still enjoy the beauty of the sport. So there's a couple of different ways to look at it, but if you're enjoying it, that's when I think you do your best work. So you've got to enjoy the challenge and the thrill of the challenge. And I do think probably as you get older, sometimes you don't like that thrill. You don't want to have to subject yourself to the vagaries of winning and losing and what that does to your emotions and everything. So I think sometimes as you get a bit older, it's easy. People go, I'm going to slow down now. I don't need that as much. I don't like what that does to my body. I want a more peaceful life. That is, I think, understandable. But then I discovered a modular synthesizer. Otherwise, maybe I would have gone down just a radio show, just doing a nice sort of ambient radio show every Monday night in on Brentwood and Billericay's favourite radio station, Phoenix FM. That might have been a nice way to sort of peter out into oblivion.
Sure.
But no, Steve Davis 50 is now on the scene. Dun, da, 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 da.
Right.
What are your plans for future releases? I see you've been pushing stuff out.
Yeah.
2023, 2008, first album, 2023. That's a fair old time.
Yes. I mean, I've been enjoying it, which is the main thing, as you've just been saying. I think if you do enjoy it, then, it's quite easy to carry on, isn't it? And so the enjoyment it changes over time. Yeah. I think certainly it has for me. And a lot of in fact, lots of the people I've had on the show, actually, we've talked about this, people who have been, around the game, as it were, in quotation marks, for, a couple of decades or whatever. A lot of the time is spent trying to kind of recreate the feeling that you first had when you first started doing that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I wish I could have done that. Yeah, they'll carry on. Yeah,
right. I mean, yeah. So I think, it's important not to get too lost in that kind of in that kind of nostalgic kind of like feeling around for things. But if you can get to a stage where the process is something which is enjoyable in of itself, almost regardless of the results. I mean, obviously, if you get results as well, then even better. But really, making music for me anyway has been, well, I do lots of things. I run a label, I DJ, I'm a podcaster now as well. But the thing that I've always liked the most is just sitting in the studio making tunes. And if that, I was saying, if that is fun, then that's okay. You know?
Great. Yeah. Tell me. Well, I was just out of interest as to. I'm not going to pick any specific artists because I'm sure people can come up with their own artists. But I think for our band, the Utopia Strong, even though I'm sure we've got a sound. Because everybody has, every artist has a sound at something that we don't want to be treading water for too long. That we want to move on so that we're not replicating album after album that is going down the same road. Because that would think that would potentially being sort of it's the same old, and also it's not challenging in that we're sitting in comfortable zones. So from your perspective, what with more experience than I've had, how do you fight against having to come up with something that people will buy and know and love because they want exactly the same, they want more of the same, but you don't want more of the same, you want to actually challenge them. How do you fight against that? How do you try and find new things if they're not there? The eternal
question. Yeah, I mean, I think it's the thing that really challenges everyone who has any sort of degree of success with recorded music. When once you've had something which connects, then there's two things there, isn't there? Really, there's the kind of instinct to maintain that feeling. Going back to what you're saying about that kind of rush of where in the case of recording music, it's like you spend time in the studio and you've got a feeling in your head that what you're doing is good, but there's nothing like having that feeling validated by a lot of people, right?
Totally,
so you get to that, you reach that point, and well, there's two instincts, right? There's the instinct to replicate that, but then the kind of quote unquote serious artist at the back of your mind is saying, well, hang on a second, isn't that a bit cheap? Shouldn't you challenge yourself to do something different? And I think it's really, really tough. I think it's very, very challenging for even the most talented, gifted people. You see some of the biggest bands in the world who, have a couple of albums where they sort of transcend culture almost, and then they have their experimental phase, which invariably enrages half their fan base or more than half their fan base. And then, they have a range of kind of responses to that. So some of them go back to the original sound and some of them, double down on their, experimentation. But I think it's really, really tough, but for me, honestly, I've always given in to the instincts to want to do something different. And I actually sort of regret that a little bit. I kind of think that I should have been a bit more calculated about it. I should have been a little bit more, business savvy, let's put it that way, about it. But, it's just I think it's something that each person, each musician, each music maker has got to kind of take their decision and make their own peace with, because there isn't a right or wrong way of doing it either. There are instances of people having great success doing taking either path, so yeah. Anyway, I wanted to talk to you about, so as I was researching this, right, one of the more interesting things I read was there's a chapter about you and a chapter about snooker in a book by Dominic Sandbrook about the 80s.
Blimey.
And it's really fascinating in its description of the development of snooker as a sport in the late 70s and the early 80s. And your kind of status, or basically your kind of position in that development as basically the first modern sportsman in the sport of snooker. Is that a description that makes sense to you?
I think it was sort of like the upping of the game for the 80s that I sort of coincided with my sort of career, was the game sort of going overground, and the protagonists started to become more professional in their their way. I wouldn't say that the players beforehand were totally unprofessional, but the game had its roots in clubs, and then all of a sudden, there'd been a world championship since 1927. So the game had always been competitive, but it was mainly just a social game in clubs. And then TV decided they wanted to show it when Pot Black was on from sort of late 60s, and then that started to be shown to the general public as a game / sport, whatever you want to call it. And over a period of time, by the end of the 70s, the standard was getting better at amateur level around the country, and the older pros whose earnings were predominantly made up of doing exhibitions, just going to a club, playing an exhibition, getting paid for the night.
Yeah,
that was the main brunt of their earnings. So they learned to be entertainers, and only every now and again were they sports people where they were playing in competition. So the vast majority of the year was entertaining. Maybe if they had a contract at Butlins or Pontins to do weekly.
Yeah, wow, yep.
Yeah, so then, but once TV started to think that they liked it and sponsors started to put prize money in, then the mentality of the player had to change from just being an entertainer, an occasional sports person, to full-time sports person. And if you could entertain, that was on the side. But there was enough prize money, you could start to become pro level. So I was at that wave. So then that's why I got this sort of like, you were the player that started to take it seriously and do practice and
this is where the Alex Higgins quote came from. Everything just made sense as you were saying that. Yeah. All the planets just of my understanding just move into alignment. Yes, that makes complete sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So now, there is the argument that everybody says this about every sport, and I don't know about musicians, is that, that the soul's being taken out of because they're too pro. Everything's accounted for. There's no human left in the robot. And sort of everything gets sanitized, and there's no personalities in the game anymore. And they're exactly the same beast, but they're just attacking it in a different way, approaching it in a different way. So, you see the golfers now or the tennis players, they all look like carbon copies of each other. They're not the McEnroes or the of their era. It seems like everybody goes, the modern day players, they haven't got any personality. They're just as if they're brain dead, as if they're robots. They're not at all, but that's how they're perceived. So, maybe you could argue the same with a bit of music that if it's overproduced, that's the same problem.
Well, I mean, like the reason that I wanted to talk about this really because I think there are parallels between particularly the rave scene and the way that has been developed in a way which is, very market oriented, shall we say? And those two things just really, really struck me as I was reading about this, but
I love the fact. I love the fact that I didn't know that I was going to be doing this podcast in my life until it happened, and I didn't think I'd ever be discussing the possibility that the rave scene and snooker had similarities.
No, honestly, really. But I think the way you've put it though, moving from, traditional working men's clubs, okay, that's a bit different to an underground rave scene, but you can sort of see the equivalency, right? Where, a quote unquote grassroots, not movement, but a grassroots kind of like culture, let's put it like that.
Yeah, you're right.
Is then kind of usurped by money, essentially, right?
Yeah, I suppose. Or what you have to then, how you have to go about it. Yeah, as a pro. Yeah,
absolutely. But okay, so I mean, your experience of this kind of goes deeper than just playing, though, doesn't it? Because you were managed by Barry Hearn, who's the brains, arguably, behind this whole development of snooker. So, but hang on a second, before we get that, I got to ask you about the Magma gig though, because this is before this. Let's keep on a sort of chronological timeline. Before we dive into Barry Hearn, tell me about that Magma gig. How old were you? 17?
Oh, well, when I first went to a Magma gig, I was still at school and everything, and I went along to see Isotope, a sort of a band that was linked to Canterbury jazz rock, and a band that had a basically guitarist called Hugh Hopper who has like legendary ties to the Canterbury scene. And we went along there, me and my mate at school, to watch this Isotope band supporting Magma. Didn't have a clue really who Magma were. And just sort of like watched Isotope play, and then stayed around with no time problems for getting home. And I seem to remember, and watched Magma walk on stage, and then that was a new life, a new world. Once I'd heard Magma on the stage and saw what they produced, then I wanted to get every album they had, and then they came over again. I think the following year when they were still on A&M, and I was an overnight fan. And I don't know. I mean, music chooses you. You don't choose the music. It's just whatever. So that was and then life gets going. Then I start to play snooker, and music takes a backward step.
Right.
For a
well,
while.
that's the thing. There was a reason why I felt justified in asking that question, because one of the things that I read about Barry Hearn's influence on you is that he told you to stop wearing prog rock t-shirts. Is that true?
No, that is as if I was groomed by Barry Hearn to be wearing bow ties over the Gentle Giant t-shirts. No, I mean we did do a lot of talking about how to sort of obviously haircuts over the years changed. I had a sort of pretty long hair as a kid, but obviously as you get older, I wasn't told to cut my hair so I looked like a snooker player with a bow tie on. But
well, you're not.
But no, there's a certain amount. We got to have some publicity photographs. But I already had a dress suit. Every snooker player has to have a dress suit, otherwise you can't play in events.
Sure.
But even as an amateur sometimes. But along the way, it was good to have Barry Hearn in my corner, because he was like an older brother and a bit more worldly wise and a bit more of a character. I was just shy with a snooker cue in my hand. I could knock the balls in, but I couldn't really speak for myself. So it was good to bump into somebody who could sort of shout from the rooftops for me. That was quite nice to have that. So management can be really important in that way, or an agent. So that's something that's very, especially if it's not necessarily your skill set to sell yourself or to do your books or whatever it might be. It's good to have people behind you that can do that. And unfortunately, there is probably more bad management and agents out there than there are good ones.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or average one. There's too many average ones. Let's not say bad, but average is sometimes not good enough, because the artist doesn't think they're average, and so when you bump into somebody who's really good in their skill set, you trust them, then you've got a bond. So, Barry Hearn and myself, we always had a bond over the fact we stuck to what we knew best, and it worked for both of us. So that was great. But I mean, I did drag Barry Hearn along so then fast forward to 1988. And I'm in a record shop in Virgin Records in Tottenham Court Road, as it was then, flicking through mainly soul music, but always go to the section where Magma records could be, just because I don't like to see them in the racks looking sad. I might buy one.
Right.
I don't know why. But then all of a sudden I saw a new album from Christian Vander, the leader of Magma. I thought, that's new. What's going on? And I listened to it, got back home and thought, yes, this is brilliant. Wouldn't it be nice if they came to London again? I didn't really know that they were still touring in France, and I could have gone over there. But anyway, so I hired them to play 3 nights in theatre in London, Bloomsbury Theatre.
Really?
And I became a promoter.
Wow.
We called it Interesting Promotions after the puppet, and then I only lost money out of it because there was 14 of them in the band. There was 5 of them in the band when I first saw them, and then they'd grown to 14 people. No, that was great fun. I had a great time with them, and I put them on for 3 nights, and it was like going back in time. It was fantastic, and I invited Barry Hearn along to that with Frank Warren.
Oh, really?
And their wives.
Okay.
So in the front row, when and it wasn't Magma, it was they were actually called Offering at the time. It was Christian Vander's Control, John Coltrane spin-off sort of project. So all of a sudden, they're sitting in the front row, Barry Hearn and his wife and that, and all of a sudden, Christian Vander's come on with a big head outfit on, looking a bit like Medusa, and started singing in tongues, doing a sort of scatty John Coltrane thing with his fingers in front of him, but no instrument. And I saw like Barry sort of stiffen up and his wife turn to him and say, "What the fuck's this?" And then they listen to one track, albeit a 20-minute track, and then they sidled out the side door.
Wow.
But they did. So Frank Warren and Barry Hearn have listened to Zest by Offering.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Frank Warren as well. So, yeah, of course, Barry Hearn will be better known to younger listeners as the father of Eddie Hearn.
Yes, of course, yes.
Who has recently made up his long-running feud with Frank Warren, actually. So, wow, this is history right here.
Yeah, things always go full circle. The moment we knew Eddie Hearn was getting very good at his job was we were up in London, me, Barry and Eddie. I think Eddie had been out with his wife and Barry's wife for a little bit of a shop or going shopping for Christmas, I think, like that. And we were in a hotel in London, sitting in the lounge. And me and Barry are sitting there, Eddie's sitting there, and all of a sudden we see some guy come up with an autograph book out of sort of left field. I sort of turned, and I sort of sensed somebody was coming over, and I immediately thought, "Oh, here we go! I'm going to sign an autograph, right?" And then Barry afterwards, Barry said exactly what I thought was going to happen as well. So this guy's walked over. And he went straight to Eddie, went, "Eddie, I'm a big fan. Oh, I think you're great. I think your boxing's going fantastic, mate. Oh, thanks. Can you sign this and have a photograph?" We were just two old blokes sitting there next to Eddie. Bloke didn't have
Amazing.
a clue, wasn't even bothered, didn't care.
Wow. Yeah. Crazy. I mean, he's a meme at this point, right? He's
amazing, isn't it? I'm his godfather. I'm probably not the best.
Are you?
I'm probably not the best godfather in the world. I resisted the temptation to buy him any electronic music or prog music. I just gave him vouchers when he was a kid for CDs.
Okay.
But I never actually said it. Here, have a listen to Hatfield in the North. See if you like this.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but he's a chip off the block. He does feel to me sort of, I look back at when I used to, or to remember back to how Barry Hearn would deliver us some lines when he was younger. And it does feel like, Eddie's sort of, he's definitely his boy.
Right. Yeah. So was he behind you becoming a professional snooker player in the first place?
Yeah. I sort of bumped into Barry Hearn because I'd gone in search of good opposition to improve my game, and Barry Hearn owned the snooker clubs that I started to go to.
Right.
And as a result of that, he started to put on small events and realised he quite liked promoting. And then as I was getting better and better, and then didn't stop improving, we were playing in more tournaments where I was knocking on the doors of being a professional. Without even knowing it, he'd started to become my manager. And then in order to turn professional, you had to apply, to the association at the time. And then more or less overnight, I was a professional and he was my manager. And we'd never really signed anything on that. It's just been, that's the way it happened. It was sort of like an unwritten rule. That's the road it was going down. And from then on in, he then started to become more interested in management, and then eventually in sports promotion, and then eventually creating events and putting on events from different sports. But Eddie's main passion is he's sort of now taken control of the boxing. So the boxing's gone to another level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, back to you. I posited that you may have been the first modern sportsman in snooker, which you sort of agreed with, but not quite.
No, because you get somebody like Bjorn Borg, who I thought was the ultimate. If I had to pick one person, I thought was just the ultimate machine, and he was
Sure. I mean, I don't really mean as a sportsman. I mean in your kind of perception of people. Your kind of like your profile, public profile.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, maybe, but then maybe maybe I was in the right time at the right place, or wrong time at the wrong place.
Sure, absolutely.
Maybe that was how we were starting to look at things, because everything up until that point, people were maximizing their earnings, so to speak. Maybe it was the start of a new wave. But I think Barry Hearn was quite good at that. He'd actually, I think he was an accountant by trade,
right?
And I think he was involved with a company that they were the first people to move logos into the UK. I mean, I might be talking a lot of absolute rubbish. You have to listen to Barry talk about this, but his company, they were involved with Fruit of the Loom, one of the first ever logo bit of clothing, I think, that everybody can remember. So, so he was early in on, changing, or in a company that was changing perceptions of things. And so when he got the potential to manage me, he did it in a very, sort of aggressively professional way. So maybe he upped the ante more than me, and I just happened to be the right vehicle to look the part, act the part, and be the sort of the corporate thing. So
right, yeah. I mean, so sorry.
Yeah, so that was that. Yeah, no. So I think maybe you are right in that respect, but I'm sure other sports might sort of disagree. But I think even if you look back to sort of the golfers or footballers, everything was slowly taking off to the levels they have now, and they're there with a sort of TikTok team behind you, things like that. You got your social media manager. I'm sure that's happening a lot more. I mean, that's taking it to another level.
Yeah, it's certainly a different world now. I mean, there's a quote from a Times article in 1981 that is in that book actually that I mentioned, which is the journalist quoting, Barry Hearn wants to turn Steve Davis into a living legend. I mean, that's
wow.
That's a statement of intent, isn't it?
Gee whiz. I mean, I'll tell you one thing. Some of the stuff that comes out of Barry's mouth over the years has been fantastic. I mean, he's just like he's a soundbite stream.
Right.
As I waffle on for ages and never get. He knows. He sort of has this sense of how to get something that's going to be sort of and a little bit of stretching of the truth or going back in time and say I claim that I said that is what we all probably do that, and so I wouldn't know if that is what was said, but all I can remember is thinking, we've got a tournament around the corner. I'm a bit worried with big Q action. Whereas he's talking on that level to journalists. I'm thinking, no, I'm putting a bit of accidental right hand side on the whiteboard. I've got to cue that before the next event. So you're doing different jobs. So but he's been very good, I think, over the years of bigging up things. And he puts a positive spin on everything, which is fantastic, especially when. Sports people can sometimes go in negative worlds and go in their caves and go into a spiral when form's not good. He was always good to have in my corner because he never has had a bad day in his life, a down day. To have somebody that positive and to always be that optimistic and having that person around you is wonderful for your karma. And in the dressing room in matches, I wouldn't have anybody sort of really there coaching me or telling me what shots had gone right or wrong on, or I'd have Barry in my dressing room because he made me laugh, and that was brilliant to have somebody in your corner that believed in you, that was shouting your name from the rooftops, but actually was good to go out for the night. And you go in the dressing room after in between the sessions and you've missed a load of shots and you're down, and all of a sudden you go, what a night I had last night, and they tell you a funny story. And 15 minutes later, you're walking out the dressing room, forgotten that you played, that you can actually go, in a better headspace now. And that was like, you can't teach amateurs. That's amateur psychology that, not everybody can do. So he's very good at that department. So, I assume Eddie's got it as well, for the boxers. But, so it's the one thing. He's like, you're, unless you've got really good friends, you're on your own and certainly you are. It's really good to have somebody who can actually get you out yourself sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, this is kind of what I'm getting round in a roundabout way into asking you about, which is fame. Because I mean, you were extraordinarily famous in the 1980s, particularly in the UK, but I think outside the UK too, certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's accounts of I read an amazing account of you going to Bangkok in 1983, and there's like 50-foot high posters of you everywhere and stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, that's the thing. What obviously this is a music podcast, and I've had lots of people on talking about the difficulties of making it as a musician, but usually from the perspective of trying to get by. There is obviously there are problems which come with being extremely successful too, and fame is a really difficult thing for a lot of people to deal with, right? So What was it like being that famous? I mean, that's a reductive question, of course, but let me ask you something more specific. Actually, what was the point at which you first realised that you were really famous?
Sure. Well, I suppose having a film crew. So in 1979, I beat in the World Championship. I beat Terry Griffiths, who was 1980. Sorry, I beat Terry Griffiths, who was the 1979 World Champion. And I was younger. Yeah, this was my second year as a pro. Nobody really sort of seen me play too strongly on TV, and I beat Terry Griffiths in the second round of the Crucible. And the next minute, a film crew filmed me walking down to the dry cleaners to get my silk shirt that I'd had made washed for the next match.
Right, okay.
Because I only had one shirt with me, as if I'd not prepared any further. So now I've got a film crew walking down the road with me. So then the next minute, my life's changed. People are looking at you who are total strangers because they've seen you on the television, and like that. And then snooker got so big that and there was only 3 TV channels back in the early 80s. And only 4 for most of the 90s. So, for most of the 80s. So, we had a trapped audience, so many people watching it. And then your life just goes mad, not just because of public recognition, but, sponsors wanting to, to do adverts with you and go on TV programs. And before you know it, you're off on the merry-go-round of doing that type of thing, which is an absolute fun buzz to be invited onto TV programs. Got invited on to be doing a sketch with Morecambe and Wise,
right.
and back in the day when Morecambe and Wise were the biggest comedy act out there. So, and I thought maybe the first time I really realised that things had gone strange was going in. I was in a motorway service station, and I sat down, got a plate of food, sat down just to shove it down my face before I got back on the road to drive somewhere else. And I realised that somebody was watching me eating.
Right. Yeah.
And I was thinking,
that's a bit weird, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's my chewing technique. I'm not opening my mouth. As my mother told me not to open my mouth when I chewed, and am I cutting this right? I'm not holding my knife and fork correctly. So maybe that was a moment. At some stage, although this is well down the line, somebody came up to me at a snooker exhibition and went, could you sign my husband's spare prosthetic leg? So maybe that was the moment when I made it. Because over the years I had signed some interesting things, but I think that was my highlight.
Right.
Or my favourite weird one anyway, yeah. So, yeah, and I don't know, I don't know other levels. The public recognition is crazy, and then also public perception, which was a problem in some ways, but we turned it around with Spitting Image. So I got on Spitting Image. So as a result of Spitting Image, the boring tag that I was getting, then even though it continued, it had been dealt with because my Spitting Image puppet was addressing that.
Sure. So
but you'd have to know about Spitting Image as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, my understanding of this was that you were contrasted with Alex Higgins in the press, and you were seen as sort of, quote unquote, the boring one.
Yeah, I was the machine. I was the robot. I was the machine, and with no personality as well. So obviously,
right. And were you also criticised for doing endorsements and that kind of stuff? Like, actually,
no, not that. No, it's just the fact that I was winning far too much for my own good, and also I wasn't giving much out on the table. I had a straight face. And I was playing the part of and also your voice is what however you speak, maybe the monotone voice, a bit sort of not a lot of people know that, a bit Michael Caine-y, a bit sort of a bit like that, and then that got a little bit of is this person's boring? All they do is play snooker all the time, and there's no smoke without fire because that's all I did. So how on earth could you be an absolute character? You're not supposed to have laughter and joke around the table. You're supposed to concentrate and knock the balls in. So it was a vicious, but because I won so much, it sort of like, it became a problem that somebody was winning too much. I think this is that. And people were getting bored with it. So they thought I was boring. I don't know. I haven't got a clue. But you can't, what I now know is that unless you can seriously change your personality when you walk on the stage. As say, there are actors that do this and sell themselves as other people. Nobody ever knows what they're like in real life. Unless you can do that, you're at the mercy of the public in sport. You go and you do the sport to the best of your ability. Then you get asked questions about it. You give it your best shot, and then you cannot control how people could perceive you. So that becomes a fascinating thing of to some degree people disliking you.
Sure.
And you have to be pretty philosophical about the fact that is going to happen. But it's a shock when it happens, and then you go, "Oh, well, yeah. Actually, if I saw what I saw, maybe I would prefer to watch somebody else, or I'd support somebody else over that person." And so I think what is fascinating is over the years of people coming up saying, I used to hate you, but now you're okay now. And that started to happen when I started losing, which was quite funny.
Well, because that's it. Because the popular snooker players, the popular snooker players until Ronnie O'Sullivan, I suppose, were the ones with the kind of heroic losers, right? So Jimmy White and Alex Higgins.
There's a little bit of that. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But you get a silent, you also get a silent, not majority, but you get you don't know. It would a bit like, if no feedback is usually means that you haven't really upset anybody,
right?
So you might, say you've got a podcast or you've got a YouTube channel, you're going to get all the lunatics that criticize, and they're just the one-offs. The vast majority of people are enjoying what you're delivering.
Sure.
Therefore, you don't know how many people are actually sort of like thinking you're okay. You only know the ones that are vehemently saying, my son likes you, but I think your head's too big for your shoulders. So after you signed an autograph for the Sun, it's quite funny. So you start to realise that that well-known saying, you can't please all the people all the time. So once you come to terms with that, you're then more comfortable in your own skin. But when it first happens, it's a bit of a shock.
Sure. I mean, I guess Stephen Hendry had a similar time of it to you, didn't he? Certainly after he started winning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a similar thing has happened as well. Sort of similar. He's got the same perception, but he's nothing like that. He's really quite fun watching how people perceive people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, those are my early memories of watching snooker. Was just this kind of like Scottish machine, just putting everything and seemingly unbeatable. But then, like you say, I mean, you see him on, doing his TikTok channel these days.
Yeah.
It's like, he's such a nice bloke.
He's great. Yeah, he does a great channel. So but in his prime, he was a winning machine, and he loved winning. And I think by then, actually, probably we all become used to that more professional winning like mentality. So I don't think he got anywhere near didn't get the same type of reaction that I got. But of course, Stephen Hendry,
right? Because you were it was the kind of new professionalism, I suppose, which just rocked up everyone.
Maybe so. But that'd be like sort of Jimmy White was one of the most popular players of that era, and Jimmy didn't win the world championship, and one of the reasons was that he came up against Stephen Hendry on 4 occasions, I think. And had it not been for Stephen Hendry, then Jimmy White would have perhaps fulfilled his ambition to win the world championship. So if anything, that people might resent Stephen for doing such a good job in the 90s of keeping one of the cavalier heroes of the game at bay. So that's quite fascinating how the public sort of perceive the pantomime villain, which was Stephen Hendry. And people come up saying, "Why don't you let him win one?" And thinking, what? Why didn't you let Jimmy win one? What do you think it is? What do you think you're watching on television's just like entertainment? It is actually a sport, even though you might not think so.
Well, that's fascinating, isn't it? The sort of the parallels between the entertainment sector or whatever. I mean, I guess
going on Eurovision.
Yeah, right. But I mean, I suppose you mentioned television being the kind of key thing that changed snooker, right? And it's true for all sports, really, because sport is, professional sport is entertainment at its core. That's why there's money in it, and that's why, that's why people want to do it. People are driven to do it, I suppose, to an extent, anyway.
Yeah.
Which brings me to something that I had to ask you about on the fame thing. you were part of the 85 final, of course,
Yes.
which was watched after midnight by 18 million people in the UK, which I believe is still a record. Like, and you lost the match, which must, well, I don't know. How do you feel about that now? Actually,
it's so long ago, I can't remember it. I can only really remember it from watching the videos, watching the final. So I know how it. I can't even imagine that it was the same person, because I don't know about you, but there's this thing about every 7 years, all your cells regenerate. Right. Apparently.
No, I realize I'm asking you about things which happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
No, but I mean, I have no perception of me then now. And in this 7 year regeneration, I'm obviously not the same person. Every one of my cells is different.
Sure.
I'm a different version. And I assume you are as well from your first album. But when it comes to that, I can still remember, even though all my cells are different, I can still remember sitting in the bath a month after that match and just playing over shots that I'd messed up during that match. And I remember the bath water was cold, that I'd been in there so long that I was in a time loop of playing shots. So that match had the most dramatic effect on me, shock-wise, to have lost it on the final ball. And it felt like such a big moment, because all eyes in 85, it was the middle of the 80s where the game had just become like so big.
Yeah, I mean,
on
like
TV. So everybody was aware of it. So that made it seem even more important, and losing even more important than when.
I mean, you've got to have been the most talked about person in the country that week, right?
Well, yeah, amazing, yeah. Yeah, totally. And, people, school day the next day or whatever, but everybody watching it and staying up, and they're bleary-eyed going to work or whatever it was. And you were involved in that moment. And long term, it's now the best match I've ever been involved in.
Right.
Even though it was also the worst match. Yeah. So it continues. So the nostalgia thing is people still remember. So people are still coming up and going, I watched that with my grandparents or whatever. And you're thinking, blimey, you were involved in that. So proud to be involved in it.
I mean, it's amazing that you say, amazing, but not at all surprising actually to me, that you dwelled so much on missed shots. I mean, is that something that was that a common thing for you throughout your career? Because I certainly know from my perspective, like I always think about the things that I messed up in a performance.
Same.
It's going to be the one mix that I screwed up, will be the one, despite having perhaps gone down really well overall.
Yeah. So is that exactly the same? Yeah. I can only really remember the shots I've missed. I can't remember anything about the matches I've won at all. It's really it's unfair. You get far less satisfaction from all of the good shots compared to the amount of dissatisfaction you get from the one bad shot ruins your round. Of golf, even the top pro golfer. There was this thing about golf where they go, okay, you've had a bad round of golf, but one shot is the one shot that takes you back the next week to play, because you had this one moment where it went right. Okay. So that's the amateur level, right? So the amateur could be satisfied with just this one time he hit a good ball in the round of golf. The pro beats himself or herself up to the nth degree with the one bad shot they play in the whole round. And the rest of the shots were brilliant. And the one bad shot will stay in their mind and ruin the rest of their day until they can exercise that beast by going out the next day and playing a perfect round. And then you go down the rabbit hole of nth degree beating yourself up over the one shot. And these are the ones that are scarred in your brain. So I can still remember these shots, even though my cells are different. I don't understand I shouldn't be able to remember anything. It's really, I'd be pleased to not remember anything, but I can just barely remember the feeling of how bad it felt.
Absolutely.
And then David Vine coming on and saying, well, I could have done that. How did you miss that? What? I don't even remember what the words were, but he said, can you believe it? I think that's what he said. And we were all in a state of shock. Yeah, because it just happened in the moment.
Oof. And that's in front of, on live TV, in front of however many people. right?
Yeah.
Ouch.
But of course, that's you don't really realise how much fun it is when you win an event, how much of a buzz that is, because that is fantastic. It doesn't last long because a couple of days after you're back at the practice table, ready for getting ready for the next match. So you don't really swim in it too much. But there's a moment of euphoria that is just fantastic. But it's still not as bad as the bad bits, but it is just fantastic. And also, I think one thing that I guarantee you is the same. When you're in full flow in the moment, playing, even practicing, whatever. But if you're in the moment on the stage, and everything's going well, there is no greater place to be, because you're in a flow state and you are you can't be happier than that. You haven't got any worries in the world. You're doing something you love to do. You're absolutely enjoying it. You're not overthinking it. You're not worried about what's happening the next day. You're not worried about what's happened before. You're just enjoying that what's going on right there. That's about as good as it gets for a human being, I think, to actually enjoy their job and to be absolutely smitten with what's going on. You cannot get better.
I totally agree. Yeah, absolutely. Have you achieved that with music yet?
Wow. Well, maybe.
I mean, just that feeling, not necessarily the standard, but like the feeling.
I do. I think so. Yes. We've had some moments on stage where I've definitely totally stopped worrying about what's going on, and actually really just listening to what we were playing and thinking, this is great. Even I'm enjoying this, and I was supposed to be nervous, to the point where I can't enjoy it until it's over. But I'm actually. Yeah, so we started. It's actually I didn't really come on just to plug things, but we got a new album out soon, which was we played 5 pieces live on Mark Riley's show on 6 Music. 3 of them went on Mark Riley's show, then 2 were then made later for sorry, we met blank for the moment. Gideon Coe's radio show. So we recorded them and played them live at Maida Vale Studios in London. And we decided when we listened back to them that they were good enough that we would put out an album. And we did it. We've got it in the sort of the version of the Strange Fruit BBC sessions. So it's coming out looking like an old school BBC sessions, John Peel style album cover. But one of the pieces we played is called Weatherall. And there's become a piece where it's a loose term for a sort of droney piece that we played at the end of records of gigs. It goes in different directions every night, but we were actually asked to play at Andrew Weatherall's festival down in Carcassonne. And then lockdown happened, but then Andrew Weatherall passed away, but then his wife decided that they want the same lineup as the one that was cancelled during lockdown. So we went out to Carcassonne and played live, and we played this piece of music, which was a droney piece at the end. And the heavens opened. It was an outdoor event, and it pissed down all modular synths sparking away or whatever. I was trying to get my body over my synth, but I'm not the biggest person in the world. So I didn't until the tarpaulin came over and covered it all up. But we felt like it was Andy Weatherall raining down on us from above, saying, "I'm still here watching you." And so we've decided that the piece is called Weatherall, and to do it was like a double meaning. But so this piece of music, when it first started happening, and we started playing this piece of music that was on the night, it was in Brighton, a gig in Brighton, and I went into that flow state and thought, this is great. Don't change anything here. Let's just keep this going. Keep the drone going. And everybody had the same. We were all nodding at each other, and it was just brilliant. And that perhaps the first time I ever felt like, yeah, I'm actually a musician. I should sort of say I am now, because I think we recorded that piece, and we may put it out because it is actually a moment where we hit a sweet spot.
Yeah, amazing. Listen, Steve, this has been great. I've got one more for you. Tell me about going on I'm a Celebrity.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's hard to say. I mean, people say, why do you go on there? Well, apart from a shed load of money they offer you for doing, for basically.
That's a good enough reason to be honest.
For basically being hungry, that seems like a fair trade. But I didn't have anything to promote. when I went on. I had to get permission to not be at the UK Championship because it coincided with that. And BBC, it was really lovely of BBC. They said, "No, we're not going to stop you doing that just for one snooker event." I think we sent the puppet up, so the puppet was in the studio. My spitting image puppet was in the studio while I was in Australia for one chat. So I think Ken Doherty, my puppet, or John Parrott, my puppet, sat together with Hazel Irvine. So it's as surreal as it gets, and I was really fortunate to not really. I sort of went under the radar a bit. Nobody was putting me up for trial, so for me, it was as close to Centre Parks without food as you could get. It was I had a lovely time, and it was great fun being involved. And I don't know. It's hard to sort of know what. For some people, that would go, I'd never go in that program. But I thought, yeah, of all of them, it's a bit of fun. So
right.
A great laugh. And I didn't think I'd be jumping out of a helicopter with a parachute on in my life. One of the most horrific things I've ever been involved in. And
really?
Oh, geez, don't do it. It's frightening.
Yeah, have a helicopter. Wow, that's got to be nerve-wracking.
Well, and it was the free fall version, not the one where you get sort of go out and the moment you go out, the ripcord opens and your parachute opens immediately. It was like 20, 30 seconds of free fall with a guy strapped to. So this guy strapped to me. We're at the back of the helicopter. And he says, right, I've got to strap you in really hard. So he pull in all the straps get pulled in tight. So it's sort of like, it's not a situation to be sort of embarrassed about. You just have to get that. This is what's happening. So I've got this guy strapped to me from behind and he goes, right, I can't move. You've got to shuffle out on the back of the helicopter, open the door and then shuffle out onto the edge so that you'll just perch your ass just on the edge of the helicopter. So this is sort of, I have no problems in my life, but I don't really want some bloke right behind me. It's not my scene, really. But no problem with it. But all of a sudden he's going shuffle forward, right? And I found myself pushing back, which wasn't what I was expecting to be doing with this ski instructor, with this diving instructor, was pushing back because I didn't want to perch on the edge because I was looking down. It looked horrendous. It looked like Google Earth. So he's going no forward. I'm going. It's so hard to get. And then the next minute, you're falling out of a helicopter screaming.
Yeah,
and that was the start of it. Then
right.
And then met a load of other celebrities who were all in for a variety of reasons, but just mixing and matching. And then you've got to talk to other people. You haven't got a clue. So my social skills, I suppose they're all okay, but
No, actually, I looked at the lineup, and you were by far the biggest name.
Oh, I don't know. No, I don't know.
Yeah, you were.
Joey Essex. Well, we had a really funny.
Okay, maybe at the time Joey Essex was. Yeah.
You look at that lineup. Who won it? Kean Egan won it from Westlife. But
Prize.
So here's one of the trials they had. They had two people that went away to try and win some biscuits. A treat for the day, and everybody else is in the camp. And all of a sudden, they tell us that we have to put ourselves in order of fame.
Oh, God, really?
But what we had to do was put ourselves in the order of fame that the people that are doing the little trial think that we would pick, or that they think is the order of fame. So it wasn't about initially is exactly if we thought we were more fate, or where we get in the order. It was what we thought they would think, that we thought they were thinking, we were thinking, they were thinking. It got that meta, right?
Yeah,
so,
right.
But in the camp, the 10 of us were trying to organise our order of fame, and it was very funny how everybody started to big themselves up.
Really,
it was fantastic.
It like
it was honestly, it was a social experiment that I loved it. Honestly, because we had Carlton from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air in there.
Right.
So he's he's massive name. We had we had a woman who just got sixth in Miss Universe, who said that TV program went all around the world, and then we had Kean Egan from Westlife. Everybody sort of could go, I've got some fame. It was really
wow, and everyone was jockeying for position.
They was thinking, no, hold on a minute, it's not about whether we are really. We got to make, it's what they think, and they only win the biscuits if they get the order we've chosen. So it didn't even really matter. We could have done any order. It was just a trial and error at their end. They were getting duck fellas, going through a pile of shit to get underneath to change the lettering, and then they'd get to come back again. And they were having a terrible time trying to win 5 biscuits or 12 biscuits for us all. Yeah, but that was funny.
Yeah.
And then, even worse than that, another one they had to do was order of being most attractive.
Right.
We all had then to organise what level from most attractive to least, right? And I was at the bottom. And I was so upset.
That's a bit harsh. That's a bit harsh.
I was thinking, well, I don't know. I'm like, I'm not sure. I just think it doesn't matter. But then, when I look back at the program when they did it, and they put me at the bottom as well straight away anyway. So I thought, oh, fair enough. Never mind.
Yeah. Okay. But you enjoyed it generally.
Great fun. It's like Centre Parks Without Food. I got paid a load of money, and it was good laugh. And for a split second of my life, instead of people coming up and saying to me, what's Roddy O'Sullivan like? What's Jimmy White like? For 2 weeks after I came out, people were saying, is Jerry Essex really that thick? and he's not. He's not at all, but they wanted to know, and he's not at all. He's well switched on.
Okay. Right. Steve, thanks so much for coming on, man. It's been great.
Paul, pleasure. I hope I haven't bored the shit out of you. I mean, like,
not at all. The complete opposite.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. If you're ever up in the Sheffield area, or you want to try or come to the Masters for some...
I would love to come to the Crucible.
Okay,
yes.
that's it sells out now more or less immediately.
Yeah,
it goes out,
yeah.
But I mean, but the Masters in London's fantastic event. It's got
that as well,
2,000
yeah,
people,
well.
But it would be a pleasure.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and I'll pick your brains over chord structures.
This is up my street. Maybe apart from the chord structures.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, let's stay in one key. Just mess around in that.
Absolutely.
Okay, pleasure.
Great.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure.
Music, not diving, with Scuba.